What if I told you that gemstones can be more than just witnesses to great events, but also vessels of profound sorrow? That an exquisite tiara, created as a promise of happiness, could become an emblem of a tragic fate? Today, we will venture into the resplendent yet mournful world of the last Romanovs to tell the story of a sapphire masterpiece whose destiny became inextricably linked with an ill-fated Grand Duchess, destroyed by the intrigues of a foreign court. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We have many more intriguing stories to come. And now, let us continue. At the zenith of their power, the Romanov dynasty possessed riches that staggered the imagination of even the most seasoned European monarchs. Their treasuries were not mere vaults, but entire worlds, where parures shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow, diadems blinded with their brilliance, and countless necklaces gleamed with a mysterious light. This was a legacy amassed over centuries, a symbol of the seemingly unshakable might of the Russian Empire. But the 20th century brought with it storms that swept away both the empire and its treasures. The revolution and the subsequent civil war scattered this splendor across the globe, leaving us with only fragments of former grandeur and the legends that surround them. When the First World War erupted in 1914, a threat loomed over the capital of the Russian Empire, St. Petersburg. Under the strictest secrecy, the decision was made to evacuate the empire's principal treasures deep into the country, to Moscow. The crown jewels, including the regalia of power, as well as a portion of the imperial family's personal jewelry, were packed in great haste. Picture the scene. Amid turmoil and anxiety, without detailed inventories being compiled, masterpieces of jewelry, each worth a fortune, were haphazardly placed into heavy oak chests. They were sealed and sent under guard to the Kremlin armory in Moscow, where they were to await better times. But those better times never came. The chests lay untouched in the Kremlin's vaults through 2 revolutions and a bloody civil war. The new government, fighting for its survival, had no time for Tsarist diamonds. It was only in the early 1920s, when the young Soviet state desperately needed funds for industrialization, that the treasures were remembered. A commission unsealed the chamber. According to eyewitnesses, the ancient chests, which held the brilliance and history of an empire, were fastened with the most common, simple locks. Opening them required neither special effort nor special keys. An ordinary Moscow locksmith was summoned, who, with his simple tools, easily broke the seals of the past. What met the eyes of the commission members was a scene of dazzling chaos. The jewels, heaped together indiscriminately, shimmered in the dim light of the lamps. The painstaking work of sorting began. All the treasures were divided into 2 categories, those of undeniable historical and artistic value, and those deemed to be merely a fund of precious stones and metal. The fate of the first group was decided. They would form the core of the future USSR Diamond Fund. The fate of the second was far sadder. To avoid legal claims from the surviving members of the House of Romanov, who were scattered across Europe, a ruthless decision was made. The jewelry was to be dismantled. The stones were barbarically pried from them, and the unique settings, created by brilliant masters, were sent to be melted down. Thus, the majority of the personal jewels of the empresses and grand duchesses were destroyed forever. Their appearance has come down to us only through old portraits, rare photographs, and the pages of the famous catalogue compiled by the mineralogist Alexander Fersman. This catalogue was, in essence, a sales catalogue for foreign buyers, a showcase for a grand sell-off of the national heritage. It is on the pages of this catalogue that we find images of several magnificent tiaras, each a crowning achievement of the jewelry art of its era. The Romanov collection included diadems to suit every taste. For example, the nuptial tiara, which can still be seen in the Diamond Fund today, is a delicate lacework of large, pear-cut diamonds. The lost sunray tiara, which mimicked the rays of the sun, was also crafted exclusively from diamonds. But more often, jewelers combined the king of gems with other precious stones. Sometimes these were unexpected choices, such as in a tiara by Fabergé, where the cool fire of the diamonds was set against the celestial blue of turquoise in an antique style. The most popular complement to diamonds, however, was, of course, the pearl. Large, perfectly round sea pearls of the highest quality were purchased for fabulous sums and valued far more highly than river pearls. But there was another stone that enjoyed the special affection of the Russian empresses: the sapphire. Sapphire tiaras held a special place in the Romanov treasury. For them, stones of exceptional quality were selected: a deep, rich cornflower blue, with a velvety depth and perfect clarity and transparency. Such jewels were owned not only by empresses, but also by grand duchesses. But among all this lost magnificence, there was one tiara whose story was not merely tragic, but fatal. And shining with the deep blue of its sapphires, it seemed to bear the imprint of its first owner's tragic fate. This story begins in the late 18th century, during the reign of Paul I and his consort, Maria Feodorovna. While their predecessor, Catherine the Great, was not overly fond of massive diadems, preferring modest aigrettes and bandeaux, the arrival of Maria Feodorovna brought the majestic empire style, inspired by Napoleonic France, into fashion. High hairstyles demanded impressive crowns, and it was during this time that the most famous Romanov tiaras were created. It is believed that the court jeweler Jacob Duval created a magnificent sapphire tiara specifically for Maria Feodorovna. It was a monumental yet elegant creation. The base of the tiara, fashioned from gold and silver, was shaped similarly to the traditional Russian kokoshnik, but its design was executed in the spirit of severe classicism. The main decorative elements were stylized ears of wheat, an ancient symbol of fertility, prosperity, and eternal life. At the center of this precious composition shone 5 Ceylon sapphires of the highest quality. Their size increased smoothly from the edges toward the center, creating a harmonious and majestic symmetry. The crown of the piece was the central stone, a huge, flawless sapphire of approximately 70 carats, above which glittered a large, old mine-cut diamond, like a star. A garland of smaller diamonds wound around the sapphires and along the entire contour of the tiara, flashing with a myriad of sparks at the slightest movement, creating a halo of celestial light around the deep blue depths of the sapphires. The creator of this masterpiece was Jacob Duval, a member of the famous dynasty of Swiss jewelers who had served the Russian court since the time of Peter III. He enjoyed such favor with the imperial couple that Maria Feodorovna herself became the godmother to his sons. However, there is another version. Some historians believe the tiara was commissioned not for the empress herself, but as a wedding gift for her eldest and favorite daughter, Grand Duchess Alexandra Pavlovna. It is more likely, however, that Maria Feodorovna, following tradition, simply passed on one of her most beautiful diadems to her daughter as part of her dowry. This masterpiece of jewelry art, a symbol of imperial power and a mother's love, was intended to be a pledge of happiness for the young Grand Duchess in a foreign land. But instead, it became a silent witness to one of the saddest stories in the annals of European dynasties. The fate of Grand Duchess Alexandra Pavlovna is a tragedy of youth, beauty, and unfulfilled hopes. In 1799, she was married to Archduke Joseph of Austria, Palatine of Hungary. It was a marriage of political calculation intended to seal an alliance between Russia and Austria against Napoleon. However, unlike many dynastic unions, this marriage contained love. Archduke Joseph adored his young wife, but proved to be a man who lacked the fortitude to protect her from the intrigues of the Viennese court. The young couple spent most of their time not in Hungary, but in Vienna, at the court of Joseph's brother, the Holy Roman Emperor Franz II. And here, The fragile Russian Grand Duchess immediately became the object of burning hatred from the emperor's wife, Empress Maria Theresa of Naples and Sicily. There were several reasons for this hatred. First, there was simple envy. Alexandra Pavlovna's dowry, her luxurious gowns, and of course her dazzling jewels, including the sapphire tiara, eclipsed everything the Austrian empress possessed. It was a public humiliation, a demonstration of the Russian court's superiority. But there was a deeper, more personal reason. Alexandra Pavlovna, by a cruel twist of fate, bore a striking resemblance to Emperor France's first, deeply loved and prematurely deceased wife, Elizabeth of Württemberg, who was her aunt. The presence of a living reminder of his lost happiness, as contemporaries wrote, disquieted the spirit of the emperor. He unwittingly showed the Russian Grand Duchess signs of attention which infuriated his current plain and jealous wife. Alexandra's confessor, Father Andrei Samborsky, wrote, "The memory of his happy life with her, Elizabeth, threw him, the emperor, into such a state of spiritual turmoil that it grieved the heart of the empress, his current wife. After this, an irreconcilable vengeance was kindled against the innocent victim, Alexandra. The empress began a systematic campaign of torment. Alexandra Pavlovna, who was of the Orthodox faith, was constantly pressured to convert to Catholicism. When the Grand Duchess became pregnant and suffered from severe morning sickness, Maria Theresa, ostensibly out of concern, assigned her own personal physician to her, who, according to Father Andrei, was skilled in intrigue, but not in healing. By order of the empress, the cooks prepared for the pregnant daughter-in-law the very dishes the scent of which made her ill. The birth was agonizing. The inept doctor used instruments, inflicting severe injuries on both mother and child. A girl was born, named Alexandrine, but she lived for only a few hours. Alexandra herself initially seemed to be recovering. On the 9th day, she was even allowed to get up. But that same evening, she was suddenly seized by a fever, childbed fever. By morning, the 19-year-old Grand Duchess was gone. She faded away in a foreign land, having never known happiness. Alexandra Pavlovna died without leaving any heirs, and her magnificent dowry, including the sapphire tiara, now shadowed by grief, began its journey back to Russia. But what awaited this jewel in its homeland? Did it find peace, or was its tragic odyssey just beginning? Having returned to St. Petersburg, the tiara with the tragic history was placed in the vaults of the Winter Palace. None of the subsequent empresses or Grand Duchesses ever wore it. Perhaps the reason was simple superstition. A jewel that had belonged to such an unfortunate owner was considered inauspicious, bearing the seal of sorrow. In the Romanov family, where mysticism and omens were given great importance, this was a compelling reason. Or perhaps it was simpler. By the mid-19th century, the tiara's massive empire design had gone out of style, and it seemed too heavy and old-fashioned compared to the lighter, more ethereal creations of the new era. Whatever the case, for 100 years, Duval's sapphire masterpiece was all but forgotten. It lay in darkness and silence, a silent ghost of a bygone era, until it was brought back into the light in a completely different country and under completely different circumstances. After the revolution, during the appraisal of the imperial treasures, Alexandra Pavlovna's tiara was placed on that same list of valuables destined for sale abroad. Its image was included in the Fersman catalogue, and at that point, its trail in history goes cold. Today, one can find speculation online that this tiara has survived and is now in the famous collection of the Dukes of Westminster. However, this theory, as beautiful as it may be, is almost certainly mistaken. The Soviet government pursued a policy of atomizing the treasures. To conceal their origins and avoid lawsuits, unique historical jewels were systematically dismantled. The stones were sold separately, and the settings were sent to be melted down. This was standard practice. Only a few pieces of undeniable historical value, which were sent to the Diamond Fund, could have survived this ruthless dismantling. The fate of Alexandra Pavlovna's tiara was most likely just that. Its magnificent sapphires and diamonds were mercilessly removed from their setting and sold off one by one at auctions in Berlin, London, or Amsterdam. Today, they likely adorn entirely different pieces of jewelry, their new owners completely unaware of the tragic and great history these stones have witnessed. Thus ended the story of the sapphire masterpiece, or rather, it was cut short. All that remains of the magnificent tiara are watercolor sketches, lines in archival records, and a sorrowful legend. It vanished, dissolved into time, just as the empire that created it. This artifact serves as a bitter reminder that even the most dazzling treasures are powerless against human cruelty and the vicissitudes of fate. They can only silently preserve the memory of the splendor and the tears of their owners. What are your thoughts on this story? Can jewels truly carry the imprint of their owners' destinies? Or are these just beautiful legends with which we surround exquisite things? Share your opinion in the comments, give this video a like if you found it interesting, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more journeys into the world of great jewelry mysteries and legendary treasures.